kind of a big agenda today, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Nick, do you, let's start off
Here.
with a roll call. Nick, Phil, sorry.
Yep.
Mark.
You're muted.
Here.
And I am here as well. So let's get started then. So do we have minutes to approve today? Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yes, there were 2 sets of minutes. I sent them out earlier today.
There was one minor correction I sent you back.
Yeah, so we're trying to keep you on your toes, Nick. I did see yours.
Did anybody have any other feedback on the meeting minutes?
No, I'm good.
Mark? Anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of February and March meetings.
As
Second,
amended.
as
Mark,
amended.
Yes.
Nick,
Aye.
Phil,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. All right, great. So, schedule update. I wanted to get this out of the way at the top of the meeting. I just wanted to ask everybody if we could move our next meeting to Tuesday, May 16th, so we can have a presentation from Public Works on our winter maintenance policies. They weren't able to do our regular meeting time, but they could do the following Tuesday.
Okay for me.
Okay.
I'm gonna be out of town that week, so
Okay.
So it
It
doesn't
should
work.
be
I'll watch the video.
okay for me, I think.
Okay, we'll just need to find out if Dan is available, to see if we have a quorum. If not, we can just go ahead with our regularly scheduled meeting and have Public Works come to our June meeting, and we'll just talk about other things. It's not a time sensitive issue, so we can work around it. So we'll just have to wait to hear from Dan. Aaron, you and I can coordinate how to work on that. So in terms of a chair's report for this meeting, I don't have much. I've spent almost the entirety of my time between our last meetings working on the site visit that we went on, and we're going to have a much more thorough discussion about that later. One thing that that's still on my to-do list is to work on the bicycle parking guidelines, and bring that to a future meeting. So that is one thing to have on. So I also wanted to thank Phil for sending me some photos of bike racks in West Concord for the bike rack inventory. The other thing that I just wanted to say that I found is I found our winter maintenance snow removal policy. It is on the website. So before we have that meeting with Public Works, we should all review that document, and I'll make sure that it goes out in our meeting packet ahead of that whichever meeting we end up having with Public Works about our winter maintenance policy. So that's it for my chair's update. Yeah.
Question, who's taking minutes today?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Is it-
Who took them last time?
I think
Mark.
Mark did, right?
Mark, Phil.
Who took them in, what month is it?
And I did February. So Nick, you might be up.
I think it's my turn again.
Okay, great.
Let's make Dan do it though, since he's not here.
Dan will have to do our next meeting, I think. Okay, great. So yeah, so just Nick, in summary, not much on the chair's report, just that we'll be sending around the winter maintenance document, and yeah. All right, so the next item on our agenda, well, do we have we have our guests here. So I think that the best thing to do is to reshuffle our agenda a little bit. We were gonna tackle the comprehensive transportation study and the bike share first, but we have some guests today to talk about signage, wayfinding signage. And so I'm going to actually turn it over to Phil, because you have the context for this conversation. So if you can get us all up to speed and introduce our guests, that would be fantastic.
Sure. So I'm not sure if Andrew is equal to David Lutzenheiser, but maybe it is. But I see Pete Sutton is on the line. Very briefly,
Hey, everybody.
If we're still
see-
waiting for David, I'm sorry, I got confused. If we're still waiting for David, we can do one of the other agenda items first.
yeah, that may make some sense. And maybe he's having some difficulty getting on, although he did acknowledge that he got the agenda with the Zoom link. So I'll send him a text while we're on the next thing and see where he's at.
All right, that sounds great. So Pete, thanks for being here, and we'll come back to you in just a second. I'll hand it over to Aaron in the meantime for a quick update on the comprehensive transportation study.
The scientists of today are creating the next.
And Phil, you're off of
Yep,
me.
sorry.
All right, so the comprehensive transportation study, so we had to go back out to reissue the RFP. Our new due date is April 27th. There was an issue with our process in that there was confusion with some of the firms, excuse me, over the procedure. And so we wanted to be sure that everything was crystal clear so that we didn't have any firms saying that they, weren't able to be adequately, have their proposal adequately judged because there was any concerns there. So we're going back out, and those are due back April 27th. We ended up having 3 proposals sent to us. But I've already had several others say, well, now we can, in fact, look at it a little bit closer, because before we didn't have enough time, but now, our schedule is lining up better. So we might actually have more proposals this time, which would be exciting. I do also want to mention that, so what will happen is once we get those proposals in on the 27th, the review team, which is made up of town staff, and I'm getting special permission to have Laura join us as well, to review the proposals and to select as many firms as necessary to come in to do interviews. What we are able to do is ask the TAC if you all would like to submit questions to be a part of that interview process. So if you're interested, I can provide you with the RFP, and you can provide any questions that you want to have asked during the interviews to me, and we can add those to the list of questions that we will be asking. So that way we can make sure that we're getting to the root of the problem, and make sure that we're getting the community involvement, but still going through the town's process. And so let me know if you want a copy of the RFP, and then I can send that over to you. You can look through it, all 27 pages of it or whatever it is, and send me any questions that you want to have in that. Nick?
Yeah, will we be able to see their responses before we submit questions?
No, so the proposals will be only reviewed by the review committee. That's the way that the town does the process.
Okay.
Mark?
Aaron, do you, so we could get the RFP soon, and when would we need to have, since the deadline for applicant submissions is 27th, roughly when would we need to have questions back to you?
Questions back to me would probably need to be, let me look at a calendar real fast.
Just a rough idea, because
Yeah, maybe around the 24th. So I have a couple of days to formulate them all and make sure that they are all coherent, and we're not, double upping on any ideas or questions.
Nick, is your hand up anew?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
Any other questions for Erin about the process of hiring a consultant for the planning for the study? So one thing that I just thought it would be useful to review under this topic is sort of what tax involvement is going to be once we hire somebody, because you know, the deadline is the end of this month. We'll hopefully have somebody hired next month, which means that the work is likely to start in late May, early June, and so it will sort of dictate a lot of our meeting agendas going forward, starting in June. So Erin, if you could give us sort of like the expectations of the committee, things that we should be thinking about and preparing for in advance of this, so that when this consultant gets here, we can hit the ground running and get things moving as soon as possible.
Absolutely. So I think a little bit of it will depend on the plan that the consultant lays out for us. They may have different and great ideas, but my idea is that we will have the TAC very heavily involved in the community engagement process, both with tapping into your networks of you know, neighborhoods, friends, family, to sort of make sure that we are reaching as many people as possible. There will be public forums, there will be surveys, there will be charrettes and sort of like on the streets, speaking to people. We're asking the consultants to come up with a community engagement plan, but I expect that some of those things will be a part of that. And I really want you all to be part of that process. We have asked the consultants to provide us with updates either monthly or every other week, or sorry, every 2 weeks. And that will be provided to you all if there's anything of note, not just we're continuing to work. And we will be scheduling them to come in and speak on different topics when different things are coming up. I'd really like you all to be involved in reviewing sections of the study when they are completed or are in draft form, so that we can make sure that we're hitting the mark with what the town is really looking to get out of this. So if we say that we want you know, connectivity with our sidewalks, if they go through and do an entire section on that, we would like the TAC to review it and to say, you missed this whole street, how dare you? Instead of saying, you know, we're just going to assume that they have hit everything. And, you know, I may also miss things. I'll do my best to not, but every once in a while something slips through. So we're certainly going to be looking for the tax involvement in that. Mark, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I was just going to ask if kind of built into the plan, there are some interim reports, or like you said, draft report or whatever, rather than kind of wait till, you know, near the end when it's like wordsmithing. So it might be it might be good if there are these kind of intermediate milestones or something leading to the report in a clear way.
Yeah, we're going to have checkpoints. That's what sort of that report, that midterm reporting, if you will, is going to be. And then we'll also have, we're asking them to create certain sections of the study, and that will be sort of snowballed into the larger comprehensive transportation study that we're doing. There will be both a draft and a final of that as well, but we are expecting that this will be sort of done in a section by section way, with it coming back to the TAC in between and working with town staff to make sure that that's being done correctly.
That's great. Thank you, Erin. So just to summarize, it sounds like there's going to be a little bit more field work this summer in terms of us being in the community, more public engagement, charrettes, you know, maybe more events like we went to the sidewalk sale last summer to have conversations with residents. So have that on your on your work plan for the summer, and reviewing drafts, reading status updates, and then we'll obviously have the consultants coming to the TAC meetings to have discussions about specific items. Any other questions from that before we move on to Pete and David? Phil, go ahead.
Just a quick one. Aaron, do you have a sense of the time period over which the project will unfold? Is this a 6-month project or a year project? What do you think?
We have put into the RFP that we are anticipating it to be an 18-month long process
Okay,
from start to finish.
all right, great. That's good.
And with interim deliverables, right? It's not like a final report at the end, but we'll have some.
I mean, it will be final report at the end that we want to have that in
Yes.
hand, but
But we'll have final drafts of certain sections earlier, so we
Yeah.
have things to work with. Great. All right, and so with that, I'm now going to hand it over to Phil to introduce Pete and David. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thanks, Laura. Very briefly, I've been a participant in a regional subgroup of what David conceived of a few years ago as a regional network of bike and pedestrian trails, regional meaning much of eastern Massachusetts. The regional subgroup that I've been a participant in consists of, I think it's 14 towns at this point. And we are very busy trying to plan out interconnected bike and pedestrian routes around our region, which consists of towns that are to the north and to the west of us. David was the instigator of that process and participates on an occasional basis, and happened to be in a meeting, I guess it was last week, when we were discussing MassDOT's relatively newly released wayfinding sign guidelines. Pete Sutton's role is, I think, the bicycle planning coordinator for MassDOT. And if I have your title wrong, please feel free to correct me, Pete. But Pete and I have known each other for several years with regard to various initiatives in bicycling in the state. And one of the initiatives was the idea of wayfinding signage as a means of assisting cyclists and pedestrians in getting from place to place. The signage seemed to take quite a long time, but it's finally out there and on the street, so to speak. And I thought it would be an interesting idea for the TAC to hear about, especially because, at least in my mind, one of the issues that is going to come up for us is the 250th anniversary of the Shot Heard Around the World. People trying to make their way from the city and other parts of the metropolitan area to Lexington and Concord, and our hope to find other means of getting here and being here without having to use their cars or other motorized vehicles. So wayfinding, I think, is a part of that. So I don't want to get too much into the nitty-gritties of how it works, because I'm going to let David and Pete make a presentation, but I did want to thank both of them for making themselves available on relatively short notice. So thank you guys for coming along.
Quite welcome. And yeah, my official title is Bicycle and Pedestrian Program Coordinator. So
Sorry,
with the pedestrian in it. I can drop I'm noticing, is there no chat? I was going to drop a link for the
Unfortunately not.
study.
That's a government thing. Sorry, no chat.
Okay.
It's an open meeting, something or other. Or...
Yeah.
Yeah. You can email it to me. I think you can have my email address, and then I can forward it to the.
Sure.
I can forward it to Erin, and she can forward it to the Mindy.
Okay. As far as restrictions go, am I allowed to share the screen?
Yes, you are allowed to share your screen.
Okay. Can someone share, make me a co-host? And then I have the study up, and I think it'd be good context just to show people exactly what Phil is talking about.
You should be able to share.
Okay, yep. So, everyone see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, this is the bike wayfinding design guide. This was put out by the Mass Trails team, of which I'm a member of. Most of you know about the Mass Trails team. It's basically the three lead agencies that build trails throughout the state: MassDOT, the DCR, and the Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. We put out our grant round every year. I'm happy to say that Concord, we awarded some funding a couple years ago to hopefully build the bridge over the Assabet River, the bike and pedestrian bridge. I'm not sure what the status of that is, but hopefully it's in design, and hopefully we'll get some funding. But just wanted to show the bike wayfinding design guide. This is something that a lot of communities all across the state have been wanting for quite some time. There isn't really one source, at least in Massachusetts, for people that want to know the correct kind of wayfinding. This is taken directly from the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices that FHWA puts out. And this is a pretty easy to follow guide that, table of contents, lots of graphics, existing guidance, wayfinding for high comfort routes. Not only is this wayfinding for actual trails like the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, but this is also really helpful in putting wayfinding on all the streets leading to the trails, equally as important. And it basically has lays out all of the basic tenets and guidelines, decision signs, where to put them, when to put them, turn signs, lots of great examples from all over the state. There's one on the Norwottic Rail Trail in Northampton. You see those blades that DCR is prone to use. You see the East Coast Greenway blazes as well. Like I said, lots of really good examples, pretty easy to follow. Your town DPW probably has experience in these. Placement examples at the very end too. So yeah, I'll be happy to throw a link or in the email to Phil, and then he can distribute it to.
Thank you, Pete. I'm David Lautzenizer, Transportation Planner at MAPC. I would say that, we've been for 50 or 100 years, we've been putting up signage for highways. When you follow 2A, you see a sign that says 2A and then an arrow that says to follow 2A on a collection of roads that goes through Concord or Route 62. And you follow the signage if you want to follow the route. And so that's basically what we're trying to do here with our regional Greenway network. And I'll show you that network in a few minutes. And so our goal, now that this guide is out, and thanks to MassDOT and the Trails team for putting it together, it's something we've wanted for a while, and to provide that guidance and template to do that. And now we're in the implementation phase, and we're looking to work with communities like Concord to implement the signage throughout the region on our planned or completed network of regional Greenway corridors. And so that the user can follow the corridors, like you follow the interstate highway, you follow the state highway system. And yes, it's obvious when you're on the Minuteman Trail, you're on the Bruce Freeman Trail, but the corridors go off those trails, and you'll see on the mapping that we're following the Battle Road Trail through the park, but that ends, and we want to get into Concord Center, and how do you do that? And so our goal is to again put signage up and to make that, as the particular cyclist or someone in walking along these regional corridors, that they have that guidance to do that. So that's sort of the overall goal of the signage program. And we thought, particularly with the 250th anniversary coming up in 2 years, that's enough time to potentially do that in Concord and throughout, the greater region. What else? So that's sort of why we're doing this. I will share my screen to show the regional, we call it the landline Greenway network, which is the regional network. So if I can, I will share that in a second here. Let me get my, so the, there we go. Okay, so this online map, GIS map, is a map of the regional network. And if we look, I will switch to a different view here for a minute. It's a little bit simpler to use, but this is our regional network, and the dark green lines are the corridors that are complete. As you see, the Minuteman Trail. I guess the trail through Concord is complete. Trail through Bedford. We'll talk about that another day. Bruce Freeman obviously is complete, and they're starting construction here through from White's Pond South. That's underway right now. And then the light green lines are our vision network, where we say it's not complete. When we say it's not complete, our goal for the regional network is to have a place for pedestrians and place for cyclists and of course wheelchairs. And that means ideally it's separate from traffic. Certainly on the busier streets, absolutely. Where it's, again, separate from traffic, where it's not possible on the lower traffic streets, it can be shared on the very low traffic streets, shared roadway space. And so that's, and part of the goal of this project is to find where are those corridors that we can actually do that in that corridor. So what we've come up with in the dark green are the shared use paths. The light blue are potential locations where we could put in bike lanes, for example, between the end of the Battle Road to Concord Center. There's space and already shoulder there to put in bike lanes. So you could do that on Elm Street, for example. In Concord Center, it's a bit difficult because of parking and there's not the space to put in a separate bike lane, but it's also more slower traffic calmed area. So maybe that's okay, but putting in the signage. Cambridge Turnpike, it's also I should say the blue are bike lanes, green shared use paths, and the yellow are what we call gaps. So there's a challenge with the roadway cross section to provide that separation that we need. Of course, Cambridge Turnpike is what it is. It was just rebuilt 2 years ago with really nice new sidewalk, and cyclists would share the roadway. So that is what it is. We've had some discussion in the past year or so to look at a separate crossing underneath Route 2 here, using the off-ramp to do that, because Baker or Sandy Pond Road comes out and then you're kind of stuck, and providing a two-way access for pedestrians and cyclists would be really nice in this area to connect underneath Route 2, and because there are many places to cross Route 2 at grade, but we like being able to cross over the highway, and this is already here, so let's do the best we can. And so I think we want to keep pushing this alternative, and other things. Like I brought this up before and people have not really liked it, but there's the potential to connect the rail trail all the way to Barrett's Mill Farm. The rail bed is here. It just needs 2 bridges essentially, and then you have a corridor that connects you to Barrett's Mill Farm, which is part of the national park, and it'll be a great opportunity to extend that there. And then we could do a shared street on Strawberry Hill Road all the way to the Bruce Freeman. I'll stop there with sort of what the landline regional network as we propose is, and I'll take some questions, and then I'll talk about potential funding for signage, and maybe let's talk about the landline network in general, and then and also questions on signage and whether that's of interest to the town or not, and go from there. Then I can talk about potential funding source for that. So thank you.
Well,
Any
I
questions?
can start us off with a question. Well, first of all, I want to say that this I've loved looking at the landline Greenway network since Phil shared it with me. I've been looking at it for days. So this has been really a great new resource for us. And my 2 questions right off the bat are, how have you been working with, communities that are connected like Concord is with all of our other communities on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail to sort of have a shared vision for wayfinding signage, or are you going about it at a town by town approach? And then sort of my second question is about this landline, which is, do you have any communities that have been using this as a roadmap for their planning processes? I'm just curious about like case studies of other towns that have been using these resources.
Yeah, good questions. With regards to case studies and the towns using it, the Neshoba Greenways was started by a couple people that found this resource, the landline resource, a couple of years ago. So they started this coalition to help implement this network. And through that, through the past 3 years or so, we've had a few rides and frequent meetings to talk about particular corridors and talk about how to move it forward. And so the corridors have moved around a bit. I just updated this map today, so it looks different than it did 2 hours ago in Concord. Because I did a little deeper dive, and of course, that's my getting prepared to present to you. And then we want to have the conversation with you on how this could best be. One, which corridors, and two, the details of implementation in terms of bike lanes and shared streets and infrastructure. And then of course the signage would follow that. And our goal with the signage program is to obviously we're not going to put signage in places that don't exist, but just to use one example, in the next 2 years, perhaps you can stripe a bike lane along here. And then we can put up signage that directs people as they come off the end of the Battle Road Trail into Concord Center is part of that network and along the Battle Road, and then all the way out across. This is a hypothetical bridge or underpass under two, but that may not happen anytime soon. So it might be coming around through the business park here.
If you can help us find funding for it, we're all for that.
Yeah, I think the challenge might be if there was a new bridge within a mile of that cross Route 2, that maybe they'd be looking at bridges elsewhere in the near future would be my guess. So I think, but this is great, but you're over here. You still have to. I mean, there's Phil and others have talked about how do we best connect Concord and West Concord by foot or bike, and ideally you want to do it without crossing Route 2 at grade. However, that's very difficult unless you swim under the river. So so it's always good to dream and think about. There is a right of way here. I mean, this street is a Baker Ave with Route at one point before Route 2 was built. That was an old road, so there's a right of way there that could be, in theory, there could be a bridge or underpass there. But that's. We're showing opportunities that could be there should town choose to move that forward. There's really no other opportunity in that area to have a crossing that's grade separated. Laura, what else? I think there was another question in there. Sorry.
Yeah, my other question was, how are you working with groups of towns that are all connected by a shared path like the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail? That project has we're actually not the committee that deals with the Bruce Freeman, because we have the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Committee. So we don't work closely on that, but I know that they've collaborated a lot with other towns about signage and rules and things like that. So I'm just curious if you have other communities where you've been sort of implementing a sort of shared vision of what signage should look like along multiple communities.
Yeah, where the actual signage should look like, I think that comes out of the guide that Pete just presented. But I think, one of the things we have done, particularly with Acton, is look at how can we connect the Assabet Trail to the Bruce Freeman? How can we connect the Bruce Freeman to the end of the Minuteman Trail, which is over here by the Trails End Cafe? So, how do you connect all that? So we suggested a route and some ideas that can make that happen. Through this area that look from an infrastructure perspective is sort of the lowest stress, most potential for separation from traffic and so forth. This is the route we've come up with. But it's, something we're going to work with you to, maybe we could schedule a ride or a walk or something to look at it in detail and get, get the town's feedback. Because, as MAPC is a region, we're looking at connecting the communities, but through that, we need to talk to the communities like we're doing tonight and try to, make that happen. Yeah. So, we're working with a number of initiatives around the region as looking at these greenway corridors and figuring it out, because I mean, to me, the rail trails are, I would say, easy, but they're there and it's obvious because you have that corridor and you can use it. The challenges are these, how do you connect South Acton and West Concord, because we do not have necessarily a rail corridor to use, but we have some other opportunities that we have to figure out and then, be proactive to try to implement that. And I guess Anne has a question.
Oh, thanks so much. Thank you so much for mentioning connecting West Concord and Concord Center. I am on the West Concord Advisory Committee. I cannot tell you how many times we've talked about making it easy. We have 2 cultural districts in Concord, as you may know. I think only 5 towns in the state have that. The West Concord Junction Cultural District and Concord Center Cultural District, they're 2 miles apart. Try walking and biking. I mean, I know strong bikers can do it, but it is really scary. And it's just not the way it should be. It should be something that invites the tourists on a bike, pushing strollers to make it should be a delightful walk, really. In honor of Thoreau, that's what we should do. So we talk about this all the time. If you want to come to the West Concord Advisory Committee, we'd love to talk with you about how we could make that happen in our lifetime. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions from members of the committee for David? Phil, go ahead.
So this is actually a question for Pete, not so much for David. With regard to the signage itself, is there sort of an opportunity for groups of towns to have a distinctive logo or distinctive something to trace out a route? So for example, I know that Bruce Freeman Rail Trail has some wayfinding signage in the pipeline, and they'll use the Bruce Freeman logo, and that's I think it's a dragonfly and cattails kind of logo, and that will be used as something to distinguish that you're on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. What I was wondering is that available for groups of towns to get you from Boston along Paul Revere's Ride, or something like that?
It is, and as a matter of fact, we encourage it. There's always a little bit of leeway when it comes to these signs. You want to convey the info you want to convey, but it's also branding too. And if you have a logo and you want to, have it throughout a whole network, that's something that we would encourage. We're doing a pilot project, the very first project from here down on Cape Cod, where we're reestablishing the Clare Saltonstall Bikeway, which has kind of faded away over time. It was established back in the late 70s, and for the past 20 years, not much has been made of it, but the folks down at the Cape Cod Commission wanted to reestablish it, and they wanted to put new signage up. A lot of rail trails have been built over the past 20 years on Cape Cod, so the original Saltonstall Bikeway has been rerouted from streets onto the trails, but there's still a fair amount that is on local streets as well down through the Cape. So this was a perfectly timed project, and the resulting signage is not only going to have the Clare Saltonstall Bikeway, but it's also going to be co-signed with the East Coast Greenway and their logo as well. So that's one example. Another one, a group similar to the Neshoba Regional Greenway that David and I have been working with, is the Mystic Highlands Greenway. Those are the folks that are off of the Northern Strand Trail, including Stoneham, Wakefield, Malden, Melrose. They're interested in getting a bike network going, and we've actually done some logo branding for them too, and they pooled their resources. They actually applied for a Mass Trails grant earlier this year, and we should be making an announcement fairly soon on all of the recipients. But that was a very strong candidate, is what I can say for that. And hopefully they'll be the second group to roll out some wayfinding signage.
So a quick follow-up question. Can you explain the relationship between doing wayfinding signage and the Trails Grant Program?
Well, the Trails Grant Program, several categories are eligible. We do, categories for feasibility, for construction, for design, for even right-of-way purchase. And last year we included maintenance, and we include signage under maintenance. So it's all eligible.
So if we were to put together an application saying, with say Lincoln and Lexington, here's the Minuteman route from, getting from, where the other people think the shot heard around the world happened, even though that's not true. We know that it happened here. To get over here, that would be a fundable project. And I guess, is the planning fundable, or just the creation of the signs, or everything?
Everything.
Okay.
And the good thing about wayfinding is it's, compared to all the other things like right-of-way purchase and design and construction, it's fairly cost effective, cheap, in comparison. I think the Mystic Highlands Greenway folks only applied for a $40,000 grant, and the maximum is $500,000 now for a Mass Trails grant. So it's pretty economical from that point of view.
Okay, thank you.
I see a question from Mark.
Yes, thanks. Thank you very much, Pete and David. Pete, you mentioned about maintenance as being something available in certain forms or cases. With regard to existing paved roads shared with motorists, one of the things that is key, especially say David mentioned about on Lowell Road, the possibility of a bike lane, is that of maintaining the edges of the road, maintaining the shoulders. Do any of these programs help towns maintain the shoulders on roads that are shared between cyclists and motorists? Or is it only on new construction?
No, not necessarily. However, I would say that you wouldn't apply for a Mass Trails grant for on-road infrastructure, but fortunately, there are other programs under MassDOT that cover that, like the Complete Streets funding program. Concord has benefited from that in the past. Also, the Shared Streets and Spaces program, which spun out of the pandemic 3 years ago, has been a huge success for municipalities that are putting bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure on their local roads. So, those are two programs that the town could apply for that I think would fare very well.
So, but it's linked to specifying it as a path for bicycles in terms of both of the things that you mentioned, or not?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about adding bike lanes and doing maintenance on those shoulders to provide for bike lanes, yeah.
Can you say more about the funding timeline, or the grant application timeline? It sounds like you're about to make announcements for this round of wayfinding signage. When will the next, would it be in 6 months from now, a year from now?
Yes. Yeah, we open up the funding every year for Mass Trails grants November 1st, and the deadline is February 1st. So that gives you plenty of time to put an application in. And we expect to be making the announcement probably within a month or so. We have all of the projects selected, but as you guys know, there is a process and it needs to be flown up to the higher ups, and eventually the governor signs off on them. And then we make the announcements, and then we have a big celebration usually in the summer at one of the towns where that's a beneficiary of the Mass Trails Grant. Last year we did one in Milton. The year before we did one in Bourne, right along the Cape Cod Canal. So we'll be sure to make the announcement when it does happen.
I wanted to bring attention to another funding source, which could come much sooner, and that is I've had conversations with two foundations that we've worked with that fund bicycle pedestrian infrastructure, and they have interest in funding a pilot signage program. So we're shopping it around to communities like yours that might take the bait, and we can work with the foundations to actually fund a beginning of this. Our hope is in 2 or 3 years out that all new projects will include the signage by default as part of the projects, but we kind of have to crawl before we walk. And so we're looking at pilots to do that, and Concord, with the anniversary coming up and so forth, it would be a good opportunity. So the process for putting in signage is one, typically hiring a consultant that would design the signs using the guide, the specific locations of the signs. Do you need separate posts, or do you put them on existing posts of traffic signs, or those details? Then you need to have a fabricator who actually prints the signs and then do the installation. So 3 steps: plan, fabricate, install. And so the town could do some of that, but the firms would do that. But the point being that the foundations can directly fund this if a proposal is put together by a community. And this, it's not we just submit one proposal, they respond. It could be a back and forth. And I can help facilitate that, since I've had that conversation. So what I'm basically saying to you is, one or more foundations have an interest in this, and I would love to fund a pilot. And if Concord is interested in advancing this, let's talk, and I can connect you to the foundations, and let's move this forward. Because I think, and as great as the Mass Trails is, there's a lot of back and forth paperwork, and the foundation would be more streamlined, particularly for a smaller project like this. It might be an easier, certainly quicker route. That said, if you could still work with the Mass Trails program, but this could be a much quicker way to get it going and get it started, because your 2 years will come pretty quickly. So yes, I would say, if you could talk amongst the committee and the powers that be, and see if this is something you'd like to do. And if that's yes, then the town would need to be the fiscal agent and procure the consultants, which could be fully funded by the foundations, but the town would have to advance that. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to say. I'm happy to work with you on that if you wish to move that.
That's really exciting. Mark, I see your hand is still up. Do you have a new question?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a few quick things. One is that it's interesting that signage oriented towards bicycles is sort of finer grained than signage. So it's, MassDOT's typical signage on major arteries. And so there can be benefit to motorists too, if it's designed in such a way that it also helps people not take the wrong route off into some neighborhood when they want to get to Concord Center or get to someplace. Another thing would be that there's maybe you're aware there's I forget what it's called exactly, Battle Road Commission or Scenic Byway, etc. And I've attended some of their meetings, and their concerns about, and also by the National Park, about sign clutter and things like that. And then Concord has its historic districts commission and historical commission and things like that. And so finding a way to be informative but not intrusive, and also the different groups have expressed the desire, as I think Phil had mentioned about consistency of the signage, that, okay, you see that sort of shape or that color, and it means, and type, that means it's helping me along, paths here. So just some things to kind of, I think we all need to be aware of. Thanks.
I think as Pete showed in the guide, you can put a lot of things on the sign. You could put, left and right to this or that, or you just have one smaller, simpler sign that directs you with an arrow. And so you could add on, or you can make the decision of how much you want to put on that sign. But at minimum, you want to have the name of the route, if there is a name, and an arrow or direction at turns.
So David, let's connect offline. I'm the senior planner in charge of transportation and mobility, and so I'm working on wayfinding signage for Rev 250 right now.
Okay.
So I think that would be great to connect about that. Like Mark mentioned, there's lots of players at play when it comes to signage, especially here in Concord, especially around our historic districts. And we're certainly interested in any sort of funding sources that are available. So we can definitely talk offline about that.
Perfect. Look forward to it.
I have one very minor follow-up question, just in terms of to Mark's question or point about consistency. I know that there's the uniform traffic signage on roads. Do we have similar requirements on these bikeways and paths, the separated infrastructure, or it feels a little bit more Wild West there? And I'm curious what.
No, not at all.
Not.
It's all detailed in the guide. There
Right.
are absolutely steps to follow and standards that have to be met. But that being said, when it comes to logos and branding, that kind of thing is allowed.
Got it. Okay, so these are requirements. These are not optional. This is what's going in if we're putting in signage.
Mhm.
Excellent. That's very helpful.
And
Go ahead, David.
I just say bicycles are vehicles, so they follow the guidelines. Whereas the basic trail could be the little disc or that little this or that. That's sort of
and
separate guidance.
And once you peruse the guide and flip through it, it's a pretty easy read, and it's really educational. I mean, I learned stuff when it came out that I wasn't even aware of, and I've been doing bike and ped planning for about 15 years now. It's always great to educate yourself on the ins and outs and the details, and I think this guide spells it out pretty easily for the average lay person and folks like all of us on the call here.
That sounds like the perfect light reading for the weekend. Well, thank you guys so much for your presentation. Any final questions before we let David and Pete go, or do you have any questions for us before we wrap up? Great. Oh, Pete, did you have something?
No,
Okay,
I
great.
just to encourage you guys to move forward. It's not as daunting as you think, putting an application together, whether it's to one of these foundations or to the Mass Trails grant. You just got to do it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, especially on such short notice. So really appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Right.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
All right,
guys.
bye.
Thank
Good to
you.
see you.
Thank you.
All right. So I neglected something at the top of the meeting. Mark, Phil, and Nick, I wanted to make sure that you have met, and Aaron as well, make sure that you've met James, who has put in a green card to join this committee, and he's observing today.
Okay.
So I just wanted to thank you. Do you go by James or Jim? I'm sorry.
Jim is fine.
Okay.
We met at the library site visit.
We did.
Yes. Me too.
Great. So so back to our regularly scheduled programming here. We have an update on the bike share from Aaron.
Yes, I have an exciting update. So we have our bike share launch on the 15th. The bikes are in, which is very exciting. They're not in at the stations yet because we're still waiting on the signage that goes with them. It won't be very helpful if somebody shows up and they have no idea how to rent a bike. So we're holding those until the signage comes in. It should be in the next couple of days, just in time for the bike share launch. We have partnered with Acton so that we have a regional bike share. So there's 4 stations between Concord and Acton. 3 of them are going to be along the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, which is very exciting. So people can pick up a bike at any station and drop it off at any station of those 4 stations, not any other station. We are going to be celebrating the Concord launch on the 15th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And then Acton will have a separate launch. They are still in the process of finalizing all of their details, so they haven't quite launched yet, but they will be shortly. So far for the bike launch, we have, which is going to be in West Concord. We're going to have recreation there. We're going to have a take and make craft from the library, which is a lot of fun. We're going to have different members of different organizations coming, such as I think the Rotary said that they were planning to come. We had someone from the Bruce Freeman, the Friends of the Bruce Freeman coming, several other as well, and some different information from different organizations as well, such as Acton and sustainability and things like that. So hopefully it's going to be a nice time. It's supposed to be beautiful weather, so we really lucked out there, but we have a tent just in case. But yeah, so I don't know if there's anything else. Oh, it's we went with a company called Colony. And so far they have been great to work with. So we're really excited to have this partnership this year.
Go ahead, Mark.
Just quick question, Aaron. So I assume that at each of those 4 authorized locations for pickup or return, there'll be some kind of map or something that shows the other locations so that people don't go off into space with the bikes.
So there is a website that shows you where all the different locations are. We did not put a map there because on the rack, as we call it, because it would be very difficult to read and very cluttered, along with the instructions for how to download the app and things like that. But on the website, which you can all go and look at, it's both on the town's bike share page, as well as you can get to it by going to minutemanbikeshare.square.site. We're going to make a shortened URL as well. But it has all the information there. You can download the app. You can find out where the stations are. I think Acton is still trying to finalize where theirs are. So they are still tentative, but they will be opening soon, and it's going to be great. You can even geolocate to see where your closest station is.
Okay, so just a suggestion for whatever it's worth, since some of us need to be told the same thing 2 or 3 times, you might want to just make a little sign or sticker or something that says these bikes for travel between, Concord Station 1 and 2 and Acton Station 1 and 2, or something just very simple as a separate reminder to the map. I don't know. Something to think about.
It'll tell you when you rent a bike where you can drop it off. So it's pretty specific. You can either drop it off at one of the other stations or return it to your station, is basically what it says.
Okay.
Does it have the sophistication of a Blue Bikes kind of thing where it'll tell you how many bikes are at a particular station, or whether there's like docks available?
That's a great question. I've only seen it from the back end at this point because we don't have it set up from the front end because we don't have the bikes there yet. But I believe that you'll be able to see if there are bikes there, because I can see if there are bikes there. So they have the capability, and I believe that they will probably it will show you, there are 5 bikes available, or there's only 2 bikes available, or something like that. And I think you can kind of guesstimate then if there's going to be a dock there. They are a little bit different in that I believe that if there is not a specific dock space available, you can dock it essentially leaned up against the bike rack. Because of the technology that they use, it's actually a lock that is on the bike wheel. So it's a little bit different, but they said that has worked very well for them. So, and we don't have the issue then of people saying, well, there was no spot for me to dock my bike. So hopefully that works out really well.
That's great to know. I had a request for committee members. Aaron asked for contributions from TAC to the bike share launch event. So I did, I have organized a little activity. Aaron, I apologize. I was taking notes, so I may be duplicating what you said, but I have a friend who's going to be coming to take photos at the event, and specifically portraits of people on their bicycles, all ages and abilities, kind of a community photo project is how I'm talking about it. So if you are going to come by, bring your photogenic face by either with your personal bike, or you can pose with one of the bike share bikes. But please do invite your biking network, and not just your recreational biking folks, but kids, people who bike occasionally for transit, that sort of thing. The other thing that is unconfirmed at this point is that I have reached out to Mass Bike to see if we can hand out bike lights as part of the event. They have a program called the Light Brigade. And given that we have a new statewide law that requires headlights on bicycles, this is a particularly useful program to help people who might not currently be in compliance with that rule come up to compliance with that rule quickly and easily. So that's hopefully going to be there as well. If anybody from the committee wants to come and be at the table and hand out lights and use this as an opportunity to talk to residents and do a little bit of that field work we were referencing before. I did also, actually, before I say this, Aaron, is the Route 2 crossing study ready, or survey ready for public consumption yet?
Not quite yet. They're still trying to work out some of the back end bits of it.
Okay, so since we're not going to have another sort of transportation oriented town survey that we would be promoting at this event, I did draft sort of a more informal information gathering survey that we could use at this event and potentially other events over the course of the summer to collect information about specifically cycling behaviors, opinions, that sort of thing from the community. And I have it drafted, and I wanted to ask this committee if everybody if there was anything that you wanted to know about cycling behaviors or opinions from the community. It's not a very scientific, big data collection survey, but we got so much great qualitative data from these conversations that we had last summer. This is a great tool to just sort of like spark those kinds of conversations. I'm not gonna go into detail about it now, but I just want to open it up for comment, concerns, etc. The idea of a survey specifically. Phil?
Yeah, so I think it's a good idea. Maybe you or Aaron can circulate what you're thinking about, and we can, make some comments about it and at least try to get the ball rolling. The other thing is this is Bay State Bike Month. Have you guys put the opening of this on Mass Bike's website? So I'll shoot you the link to the website. They have a listing of bike events that are coming up. You just have to, put it in, and it should populate. So I'll send you the link, and you guys can, put in the information that you think is appropriate for that, and maybe you'll get a few people taking a look at it. especially since it looks like the weather, I looked at the weather while we were mentioning it, and it looks like it's going to be really nice day. And I hate to say it, but I've invited a whole bunch of my friends who, are basically old guys who ride bikes. So there may be a bunch of old guys coming on their e-bikes. I asked them if they would come because we were talking about that, Laura. So we may get a number of people who will show up on the sort of more recreational style e-bikes as opposed to commuter style e-bikes. And, we'll see who decides that whether they're going to show, but we may get some folks showing up. So I'll also be happy to spend some time at the table. And then the most important question, and this is for you, Erin, is there going to be ice cream? That's really, how you get people to show up at these events.
There will not be ice cream,
Oh,
but
no.
I was looking at mini cupcakes because
Oh, okay, that's good. That works.
there's a whole process for health and food permits and things like that. But I spoke to our health director, and if I just do mini cupcakes or like bags of chips and follow special procedure, then we can get away with that. So it will probably be mini cupcakes that I am gloved up and handing out and very careful about.
Great. Any other, so yes, to answer your question, Phil, I will circulate the survey. If I can have everybody's feedback by end of day on Thursday, I will consolidate the feedback and print the surveys on Friday. And so I'll make sure that those go out tonight after this meeting to everybody.
Laura, you should have that go to me.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have it go to you and then you'll send it to everybody?
Yes, and then I will take the feedback and consolidate it.
Great,
Yeah,
thank you, Erin.
If Aaron and will anonymously consolidate the feedback, and we'll be good.
That's right.
Thank you, Mark, for keeping us on our open town meeting rules. And Erin. All right, any other questions about the bike share or the bike share launch before we move on to our last agenda item? Yeah, Mark.
Laura,
Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
I don't know if there's any easy way to get the word out to some of the merchants, because there is an ice cream shop and there are, Deborah's and other places that might just want to be aware that there's something going on that day in case they want to put an extra sign out or hand out coupons or do something else lively.
So I reached out to the West Concord Advisory Committee and the somebody else is escaping me right now, and the visitor center is aware. So I believe that they are aware, but I am also going to, you reminded me, I can put it onto the visitor center has an events page, so I will put this on there as well. I hadn't thought of that until now, so I'm going to do that first thing tomorrow. But I believe that otherwise, we weren't in time to get it into the bridge because we were still waiting to hear back to make sure that we were going to have more than just me standing there with a table. But we have everything confirmed now, so it's not in the bridge, but we're getting it out on social media, and I think that people riding by will also be interested and maybe stop and say hello.
Phil?
So I took a quick look at the map that the company has posted, so that looks good. And maybe we can talk about, and I had this conversation also with Beth Williams about a route to get people safely back and forth across Route 2 to get from Concord Center to West Concord. So we can do that offline. The other thing is maybe you can put up some posters or, just print out some stuff and put it on the kiosks on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, because there's one, of course, right in the center, and there are kiosks all the way up to, I think that the northern end of this is at Donlands. Does that sound right to you, Erin?
Yes, that
Just
is
right
where
behind
the,
Donlands?
yes, Brook Street is right
Brook
behind
Street,
it.
yeah.
So that's where Acton's other bike share will be. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to just throw out, and I don't know if you had any communication with the town of Acton on this, but they also have two different types of bike shares for mobility devices. One is at Nara Park, and they keep the bikes in like a shed right at the park, and those are available for free. So maybe there's some way of cross promoting that. And then there's a group that has mobility devices for people with various types of disabilities. And the name of this group, that's just like completely out of my head. So I'll send over the name to you. They bring them over and park them. They park their truck at Acton Teamworks, and that's where they take the stuff off of the truck. And they have like a group kind of program for people with various types of mobility issues and other types of handicap issues. So maybe that might be a good group to reach out to. And then the last question I had for you is, what is the plan for the couple of tricycles, mobility tricycles that were purchased? Are they going to be deployed as well?
Yeah, so the adaptive bikes that the town owns will be added into the fleet. We are just waiting for, they have to send the bicycle locks separately because they, I think that they've ran out of them. So we are getting them sent by the end of the month, and they will be implemented then. I'm talking to Acton tomorrow, so I will definitely ask them about the bikes at Nara. I know that we had originally talked about having one of the bike stations at Nara, but it was decided that at Brook Street was probably a better location because they want people to be able to access grocery stores and be able to use it for errands and things like that.
Yeah.
Not only just for recreation. So we are talking a little bit more about that, but I can certainly ask them about those bikes at Nara and see if we can somehow bring those into the fold, if nothing else, just to tell people that they are available.
Yeah, I think that would be great and people would appreciate it. Thank you. Great job.
So I'm going to move us along just because we have this last agenda item, which is to debrief our site visit from last Tuesday. I have prepared a slide presentation. I apologize in advance because it is long. I'm going to move through it quickly, but I think that it will be helpful. Erin has kindly helped me with this a little bit, but I'm going to say that all the bad parts are mine. All of the good parts are hers. Not all of the things in this slide presentation reflect Erin's beliefs. It's mostly me. So, with that caveat, I'm going to share my screen. But this will help us sort of debrief what was learned at that event, and then hopefully spark a discussion and bring us to some next steps. So I just want to since we have some visitors in the audience, I think it's just useful to say like why we're doing this and what the tax role in all of this is. It was very helpful for me to have a meeting with Alan and Steve, the Director of Public Works, and our town engineer to talk about, how do we work with them and also the traffic management group, which is mostly made up of town staff. How do our two roles come together? And, what it very much came down to was engineering and expertise and professional understanding of these issues versus like community policies. Like we are the policy decision makers as a community on the tax side. So, policy is about articulating what are the desired outcomes, because there's obviously many strategies to achieving a desired outcome, like we want to reduce the speed of the cars traveling on this road. There are lots of different engineering solutions if we've decided that that's the policy outcome that we want. Every solution comes with a set of trade-offs. Our role is very much to balance these competing interests that we have within the community. We always have limited space, limited money, and so our role is to figure out where our values are as a community and when we're allocating those scarce resources. And also the quotes are from our mission statement specifically. This was about, the site visit was about collecting data relevant to this issue, and hopefully in these conversations following the site visit, we will be developing policies which support innovative multimodal actions, which is sort of a vague phrase, but that's what our mission statement says. And then obviously our staff's role, they are the experts in their fields. They collaborate and advise on these projects. They're going to be the people who are designing and executing once we've decided what we're going to do in a situation. But just wanted to sort of lay that groundwork before we move on. So these are some of the conditions that were observed during the site visit. The roadway is excessively wide for the desired speed for this area. The paved sidewalk is smooth and consistent and wide and in good condition on one side of the street, but not on the other. There's a stone desk path on the southeast side of the street, which is relatively narrow, not particularly smooth. This was observed by all of the participants. And I should say that we had about 14 participants at the site visit, 15, I think, Erin, because you didn't fill out a survey. The crosswalk is quite faded. There are some high visibility pedestrian signs on the roadway, but they are not doing what is desired, which is slowing people down enough to stop at the crosswalks when somebody would like to cross. And the library staff said that they were very concerned about nighttime conditions, so not enough pedestrian lighting. Just for those of you who may have forgotten what it looks like, here's a screenshot of what it looks like. This is the crosswalk we were observing. And just to put this into context, this is an important mobility corridor. Sudbury Road between Thoreau Street and Main Street is a very important mobility corridor for everyone, for people on foot, on bicycles, on other micro-mobility devices, and for cars. We've got our village center here, we have our library here. The Alcott School is less than half a mile from this crosswalk if you follow Stowe Street. And then the CCHS high school is right down the street from here. That's 1.1 miles from this crosswalk. And then we obviously have the commuter rail station. So there are many potential routes that would take this, that would go across this crosswalk and also walk down Sudbury Road. So as we're talking about solutions, keeping in mind this as like a multimodal mobility corridor is very useful. The very well-established goal coming out of this site visit is that we want to increase the safety and comfort of pedestrians. We heard from the library director that she's actually had calls from people who say that they no longer come to the main branch library because they don't feel safe crossing the road there. Reports of near misses. So this is clearly #1 priority. And to do this, the solutions are to reduce the speed of cars, to calm the traffic, and to make pedestrians more visible, sightlines and lighting. So those were like the main things that we talked about at the site visit. Before I move on, is there anything missing from this in terms of just how to address this particular goal, not other goals that we might have coming out of the site visit?
I think you got it, Laura.
Okay, great. So there are other potential goals and considerations to be weighing as we make a decision about what the best solution for this site and other sites like it are. So just to zoom out for a moment, our point at looking at this particular crosswalk is in part to help us increase our understanding of what is the best place-based design for Concord, and coming up with community-based solutions when these very common problems come up in other places, because they will come up in other places. So other potential goals and considerations that I identified, but I'd love for the committee to add to this list, is increase the safety and comfort of cyclists, especially students, since there are 2 schools very close by, and transit users, given the commuter rail station. Perhaps planting more street trees. I know that that's come up in conversations around town in recent months. Making the sidewalks wider and more accessible. As was observed at the site visit, the stone dust sidewalk is not not particularly accessible, and not wide enough to comply with the 5-foot minimum for what a sidewalk is supposed to be according to the MassDOT regulations for sidewalks. Enhancing multimodal connectivity, that's our charge as a committee. And then potentially creating space for on-street bike parking or bike share parking. That's been on my mind since I know that there's very few places that we have the ability to deploy bike share parking. And one of the things that I think would be great is if we had a bike share that was more visible, given that our 2 bike share locations are tucked back into parking lots and not visible from the road. So having something that was right on the street, right in the center of town, to announce that there is a bike share, that may be a possibility as well. Are there other potential goals or considerations that we should be weighing as we make decisions about what solutions might be best in this location? I see Nick formulating a thought.
Not so much that, just back to your very first statement about the speed. Excuse me. Is that that's a statement of perception, right? There's no measured speed. There was no measurement of speed of any vehicle. So that first statement about speed is a public impression of the situation.
I would say that, yes, we did not have a speed camera at the site visit. That is true, but we did have a police officer there. And we were observing the speed as part of our site visit. I
want to challenge that.
Okay.
So a bunch of data points by us standing around looking for half an hour, that isn't data. That isn't useful. You can say it's a perception, but I'm a little uncomfortable about presenting that this is a fact.
Okay.
Okay. And I think that goes for a lot of this, which is that we didn't go through an agreed process for collecting data and coming to conclusions, but I think you're presenting this almost as conclusions.
I'm presenting what was discussed. Let me give some context for how I came to what's on here. We collected a survey from everybody in terms of their observations of the conditions of the roadway. You are correct that speed was not on there. I think that I definitely learned some things that would need to be modified if we were going to use that survey tool again at a site visit, including putting speed on there. I think that we could certainly talk to the public safety officers about putting a speed. What is it called, Erin? I'm sorry. What's the thing?
Yeah, I can cut in. I've already talked to Ron Holsinger, and we can see if we can put up a monitoring device, which will help us to get the average speeds as well as the highest and lowest, so we can really figure out how if people are speeding, what those speeds look like, things like that. And we're looking to do that shortly.
So let me just summarize what I'm getting at here, which is that I'm comfortable saying that we had a session and there were perceptions shared, and here are the perceptions. I'm not comfortable presenting that we've come to conclusions based on any kind of process or data that was very thorough. Okay.
Yes, these are perceptions. We collected perceptions from conversation, from surveys, from the initial letters from the library that cited the speed of cars as the concern, as one of their main concerns. I will also say that I sat and visited the site more than just this one site visit. So I had 2 other site visits where I sat there for quite some time to observe speed. I did not have a speed camera with me. But just for context, there was a question that came up during the site visit, which is what is the posted speed limit? And I went back and confirmed that the speed limit is 25 miles per hour in both directions at that location. So I am curious, for those of you who were at the site visit, do you feel like it is an accurate reflection to say that speed was a concern from most people who were discussing this at the site visit? Because that was my.
I'm comfortable with that statement, that it was a concern that was expressed, not that it was a conclusion or that we have any data to support it.
Any other thoughts from the committee on that? Mark?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree somewhat with what Nick is saying. I think that it's important to move slowly in this while we're sort of gaining our feet in terms of working on criteria for improvement and this particular somewhat complex site. Because of the physical nature of it and the uses and all that. I think getting, part of laying down a method would be to come up with these different ways, quantitative and interpretive, or opinions and things, observations, in the clearest possible way, separating them out. So, for example, getting speed measurement equipment there and seeing over 24-hour period, or over a week, how things vary with time and in terms of numbers of cars and speeds and whatever we can get there. That's certainly objective, useful data. I think another so desired outcomes, increase safety and comfort of pedestrians, that's absolutely clear. The other ones, as Laura was saying, I think are a little more general. I would add something about, enable the library to function. I mean, this is, some places it's a loading dock and a pedestrian crossway and a temporary short-term parking place in an area that also overlaps with the Emerson Umbrella parking, as Nick had said about it getting full, not with library users only. And Steve Dukran was mentioning at the site about, with regard to, I think Laura's question about possibility of a stop sign on the cross street there. And he was saying, well, you have to kind of prove that it's used a lot. Well, it occurred to me later that it may not be so much used as a cut-through street, but it's the most common access, I think, for the park. Probably go on to Sudbury Road. I don't know. So it has an unusual kind of set of usage patterns. And as far as the perception of speed, I think it will be helpful. And the library director, I talked to her about gathering more detailed information about people's experiences about near accidents, or safe concern for their safety. And she said they did have some kind of survey before, and she'd bring that out again, where I think it'd be very useful for us to know if it's happening, mostly in the day, mostly at night, whether it's happening.
Is Mark,
the side road.
Mark, you froze for just a second, at least for me.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, anyway, but I'm just saying that there are people going straight through the, Sudbury Road, on Sudbury Road, staying on Sudbury Road. There's other people. I was a little surprised, but I heard kind of for the first time at the visit about a big, frequent concern about people turning off of the side street there onto Sudbury Road and cutting across this crosswalk. I don't know if anybody else heard that, but that was a little bit new information for me.
So I have a question about next steps here. So it sounds like there's a desire from the committee to have a speed data for this intersection. And my questions are, number one, how much speed data is enough speed data? Because, we can measure it for a day, we could measure it for a week, we could measure it for a year. How much data do you need to say speed is an issue in this particular location? Because this is about process.
I think it has to deal with the perception, whatever they're telling us. If they're saying speed's a problem at night, then we need it at night. If they're saying it's always a problem, we need a reasonable sample, not necessarily one linear week, because 1 week out of the year is ridiculous. But, different days on different weeks scattered over some period of time, that statistically makes sense. So it depends.
And Mark, do you have something?
Oh, I was just going to ask if Erin had any idea about what the police monitoring would what is the typical run for that? I mean, at least 1 24-hour period would be the minimum, I would think. And then, like Nick says, ideally sample, weekday, weekend. Fridays are a weird day for traffic in my experience. I don't know. What do you think, Erin?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. I know that the police will certainly, they're certainly happy to put it out and certainly look at dirt, different times of the day. And I think it's typically put out for not just, 6 hours at a time or something like that. It's put out for a couple of days at a time, is my understanding. And they can do it sort of in a cyclical, once a month or something like that for a couple of months. But it is important to note that it's one of, I think, the most popular requests that the police get is to monitor the speeds in different areas, on different intersections, different streets. So it is something that I will speak to them about and see what sort of our potential is. But I do think that it is important to note that this is all, a pilot process in terms of looking at a site. And I think that there's things that we're, coming away from. We knew that this wasn't going to be the only information that we needed in order to make suggestions as to what could be the best thing to put into this area. But I think that there's a lot of, I think that if we go through this presentation and sort of see what are the things that have been teased out of that conversation, because that, we did have a site visit, and I think there's a lot of value in going through and seeing what we all put on, well, not me, everyone else put onto their surveys, because I think it was eye-opening to me, at least, some of the differences between what people perceived. For instance, saying that I remember seeing one that said that there was no crosswalk, and I thought that was fascinating because I could see a crosswalk, and so maybe we have different perceptions about what these kinds of things are. And I think that too, a lot of what came out of those surveys that Laura put together here, I think can really sort of be a jumping off point for that discussion about what is the proper, what would be sort of the best things to put into this area, and what can we look at in terms of what might be the best opportunities in the short term and the long term, what are the financial things that go along with that, and what more information do we need in order to move forward. This is just the first step in a long process. This isn't going to be we're going to take this information and we're going to make a decision tonight. This is isn't this information interesting, and what can we use to move forward from this point?
Right. And just to clarify what is in this presentation, because I think there may be some confusion about it. This is conversations that came up during the site visit, issues raised in the letters that we received, observations that either myself or Erin or other people who have visited the site independently have made. So, this is not a completely comprehensive thing. And I do want to go back to sort of the first slide. What is our role here? It is not our role here to know exactly what the perfect design for a bump out might be, or even the bump out is necessarily the best thing. We have a town engineer to answer a lot of the questions about how do we deal with traffic making left turns? Is a stop sign appropriate here? What I want to pull us back towards is we know that there's a perception of safety. There's an issue with safety here. We need to make some decisions about what kinds of trade-offs are we as a community willing to make when it comes to pedestrians versus cyclists, drivers, and their ability to drive quickly through this area versus children being able to cross the crosswalk with their parents. We need to make those kinds of decisions. And so obviously we need more information, and we will have a moment at the end to say, what are the next steps? What more information do we have? But does that make sense before I move on any further? Okay. So These were some of we had some potential options on the survey. As I said, we learned from doing this pilot site walk that we needed more options that were on this survey for potential safety improvements. Like we had signage, but we didn't have a separate thing that said like flashing signage, which is sort of two different things. And a lot of people perceived those two things differently. Similarly, we had brick crosswalks, but we didn't specify like real brick crosswalks versus stamped brick crosswalks, which have very different like possible, problems with them. But you can see that, people all agreed that pedestrian friendly lighting was a priority there. Interestingly, we were there during the day, so we don't actually know from the site whether it was dark there. So, maybe one of the things that we still need to know is we need to have somebody go there during the night and take some pictures or something like that. So artistic crosswalks came out very popular. Brick crosswalks less so. Bump out was relatively popular. Signage was very popular on the survey, but then there was a discussion afterwards where a number of red flags were raised, and it was my perception, and I'd like to check this with the committee, that we sort of agreed that the signage that we were talking about was some kind of a flashing situation and not necessarily more signage, more individual signage. Mark?
Oh, yeah, I just want to say I have serious concerns about the existing signage. Flashing signage is sort of getting into the solution. I think that one of the observations is that I don't think the existing signage is as effective as it could be. It's not doing the job. And I think it's both that there's too many signs and maybe not the right kind or what, I don't want to get into the detail. I think flashing is very much a solution or towards a solution, but I put one of the red flags on signage because I think that's not working. It's something that in my opinion, is not the greatest.
And just to be clear about what responses these were the desired safety improvements. That I have to say,
posters.
I didn't create an infographic about observed conditions because so many people wrote notes in the margins that I thought a more qualitative analysis of what people observed was better. Than saying 2 people thought there weren't crosswalks and everyone else did. But we definitely established that the crosswalk was faded. Like folks said that multiple times on their surveys. Any other things to add to this before we move on?
I would just say that again, this is like something that it makes sense kind of as Erin said, and I think Nick was asking for maybe not to put words in his mouth, is that it's a first pass thing, and we're kind of figuring out how we're doing it, and gathering various perceptions is helpful in terms of going over again and then moving to another step. But I think we should keep going.
Yeah. All right. So I'm just going to talk briefly about traffic calming and share some, we keep talking about evidence-based design in these meetings. So these are the established facts about traffic safety. It's abundantly clear that pedestrian fatalities happen because of speed. And so if there is a safety concern in a location, it often has to do with speed. And so these are the statistics about survivability of a pedestrian crash based on speed. Speed is the #1 factor in pedestrian fatalities, as I said, and speed limits is just a portion of the equation. And I'm actually quoting the Smart Growth America guidelines here. Streets with wide lanes allow room for mistakes and encourage higher speeds regardless of speed limits. So we have a 25 mile per hour speed limit in this location. Most people who were at the site visit perceived that was not being followed. And I will say very strongly, I sat there for quite some time when there wasn't a large group of people there, and I saw people flying down that road. So I'm very excited to get the actual data for that. Narrower travel lanes, again, I'm quoting, narrower travel lanes naturally slow traffic by creating a sense of enclosure regardless of speed limit. Adding streetscaping, trees, and other visual obstructions also give drivers a clue to slow down. So this is research-based, evidence-based design principles in streetscapes design. This is from the MassDOT guidance on speed management. So their goal for roadways is self-enforcing, meaning that the roadway design and speed management tools that are implemented will actually force people to go the speed limit that is posted. So the Sudbury Road speed limit is appropriate for a pedestrian area, relatively appropriate. I'm sure we could argue about that, but 25 miles per hour is pretty slow. But people tend to drive faster. And so in terms of the width, the desired width of a roadway, travel lanes of 10 to 11 feet. Steve Dukran at the site visit confirmed that this was the Concord CPW's guidance that they follow. And this is from MassDOT. The desired width of a travel lane is about 10 or 11 feet. I did bring tape measures with me to the site visit, and we did measure the site, the crosswalk at the narrowest, we measured the roadway at one of the narrower points, which was near the crosswalk. I can confirm that I measured 30 feet with the tape measure, and then I used GIS data to take other measurements along the roadway. So we know that it's about 30 feet wide, meaning that we have enough space for 3 travel lanes of cars at the location where the crosswalk is. And this is actually one of the narrowest points along the roadway. I measured 29.4 feet here, but there are trees, so I would go back with a tape measure. Maybe this falls under more data is needed for this instance. Is exactly how wide is the roadway all the way along. But we know that even at that narrow point where the crosswalk is, we have about 10 extra feet of space there, 5 feet on each side of the yellow line. And since we know from evidence that wide lanes encourage speeding, it will not be surprising if we get speed data back that says people are traveling in excess of 25 miles per hour. So this is what it would look like if we had 10-foot travel lanes in that location. And this is not perfectly to scale, but I can say that it's pretty close to scale. So that is what the roadway would look like if it was narrowed to the guidance. And it gets much wider as we move towards Thoreau Street. So for cars that are moving from Thoreau Street towards Main Street, they're coming from an area that's actually much wider. According to the GIS data, I was measuring 35, 34 in several places. So we have 15 extra feet of space there. Now that is because there is parking allowed on both sides of the road at those locations, but because there is a 2-hour parking minimum along the sides of the roads Monday through Friday, when the library is often open, there's almost nobody parked there most of the time. It'll be a few cars. And I do remember from reading the Nelson Nygaard parking study that there was a lot of parking on that particular street, parking availability. People just don't tend to park on Sudbury Road frequently. So the news is that we have space. We have a lot of space on this road to work with. It's not being maximized by any means, but we have a lot of competing needs. We have pedestrians, especially elders. We were hearing from the library and folks with little children at that crosswalk. I can say that I am a cyclist and I travel that road at least once or twice a week. And I know that there are many other cyclists that do, since I see them. And I actually had the opportunity to talk to some of them while I was sitting there observing the crosswalk. We have transit riders, we have drivers, obviously, and we have abutters. So how do we balance the competing needs of all of these people given what we know about the space? This is just something that I wanted to throw in here. It is a potential framework for us that we could maybe use or riff off of. If you've ever read Confessions of a Recovering Engineer or Strong Towns, both by Chuck Moran, He has a framework that is that I really like. Humbly observe where people in the community struggle. Ask the question, what is the next smallest thing we can do right now to address that struggle? Do that thing, do it right now, and repeat. You know, we have a tendency in this town to write very comprehensive plans, to come up with very big design things that need a lot of money. And then we have a lot of places where smaller fixes may actually be a very good return on investment. So this is a potential framework. And so this is just a transition slide. We can talk about this more at another time, but I do want to get through this. But these are some potential short-term solutions that I have observed and talked to people about. Steve Dukrin said that he was all about painting fog lines in this location, and I did some research to kind of understand that methodology better. Obviously, painting a line on a street is cheap, it's easy, it's fast. There is evidence to support that this works. Walk Boston says painting fog lines to narrow vehicle travel lanes to 10 to 11 feet helps reduce vehicle speed. And it also says that bicycle and pedestrian volumes increase as the lane width decreases. So if one of our goals is to increase multimodal travel in this area, there is evidence to support that just visually, even just visually wide narrowing a lane can help increase pedestrian and bicycling. And I have sources for all these things. Was there a question?
Well,
No,
Laura,
just-
go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was mentioned on site was widening that crosswalk, and it was on one of your slides too. But anything that could be, and I think it's inexpensive to widen the crosswalk, change it from just white stripes to something that stands out a lot more, that would slow people down, and ideally have it integrated up into the landscaping towards the parking lot so that it was visible as a significant pedestrian thoroughfare. That would really help to slow people down. And I do not think that is expensive. None of it.
No, and that's what this slide was.
Yeah.
This is the existing crosswalk. We could repaint it. It could be wider. You know, we wouldn't necessarily have to put stamped bricks down in order to make it a more visible crosswalk. So that
Right,
is,
but I think the thing is to do it in a way that it jumps out to the motorist as the fact that this is pedestrian space, not car space. So it may be more than just white paint, right? It may be more complicated than that, but it's not going to be expensive. And I also think extending it into the landscaping to the parking lot carries a big message to the drivers that this is really a pedestrian thoroughfare.
can you say more about that? What that would look
Well,
like?
sure. Right now, there's that scraggly little stump of something that's sticking up next to the sidewalk. Yeah, that thing. And there's a bunch of other stuff on the left of the sidewalk. And if you could widen that sidewalk into the parking lot so that it was a wide sidewalk coming right down to a very wide crosswalk that had a different than white paint treatment, you know, and then put in lighting along that path maybe, so that it's lit all the time, that there's this pathway coming from the parking lot right up to across the street. It's a big message to drivers as long as it's visible about, you know, a couple hundred feet up the road. That's all. I think that's it meets your objective of doing something that's not very difficult to do. It allows us to test a concept without, you know, asking for $100,000.
I do want to, I think Aaron may say this if I don't, but I do want to point out that the sidewalk that was that you see here was just put in.
Yes, it was just.
Yeah, sunk costs are sunk costs. You can't look at those. If you're going to solve a problem, you've got to solve the problem.
I do think that I would ask the question also. I'd like to see the evidence of modifications out like way off of the road, how much those would impact driver behavior, because we do have good data about fog lines, about crosswalk designs, about other potential modifications for roadway design, and pedestrian street lighting, which tends to be overhead and comes out over the roadway in order to illuminate the crosswalk. There's really good data for all of those things about how much it reduces crash fatalities. And I would ask the question, how would we in an evidence-based way, assess whether fixing next it would
You broke up some there. I didn't hear it all.
You're frozen, Laura,
am I
or
am
you
I
froze a
back?
little bit.
Yeah.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. So I would just like I'd like some more information I would like some more information on how modifications outside of the roadway and the sidewalks adjacent to the roadway modify driver behavior, because I think that might be very hard to quantify in a
okay.
data-driven way.
Let me just hold on to one part of that, and that is lighting along that path. Because if lighting is a problem in general, if we put some lighting along that path, the sort of overhead lighting you're talking about, the path to the parking lot, I think that would be helpful, just in terms of general illumination. And I think there probably is data about the benefit of illumination.
So Nick, there is a light that you can see in the picture. No, over to the right a little bit, Laura, sort of in the
The
middle.
black one, yeah, that.
Yep, yeah, so that does cover the pathway. That is the brightest that it can be, based on, I believe, what is allowable with the abutters next door. I will say that the crosswalks were just repainted. I just took these pictures today. They may not look super bright, but trust me, compared to what they were just last week, it is much clearer. And I spoke with Steve Dukran today, and we have to do some engineering and some designing, because the roadway is not, like Laura pointed out, it is not the same width at all points, because it is a historic town. And so we are looking to paint fog lines. It is in our contract for, I believe, this year, for our painting contracts. It'll be happening later, but it will be, we are looking into it for this current contract. But I do appreciate what you're saying, Nick. I was looking at some different information about different types of crosswalks and things like that. Laura and I talked about it a little bit too. There are issues with everything, of course, and all the solutions have something that may be great and something that may not be so great. Yeah, one of the things is the brick crosswalks, which are an issue for ADA, but we do have this new solution that we're going to be testing out in Maine and Walton, and I think will be sort of a great in-town case study to see how it looks and how it works in person, and how the town, if the town really loves it as much as I think that they will, to provide an ADA accessible solution that has been shown to really make crosswalks more visible, because there are a lot of concerns, I guess, with the artistic crosswalks. And I was looking at some information that they are not approved or recommended by the Federal Highway Administration or the US DOT. And I was talking engineering about them, and they do not recommend using them. So this is a great solution.
Aaron, can we do that just with paint, just to test the concept, or not without doing it a more expensive way with the red?
I mean, I think that the issue is that if we're going to be painting it red, I think there's going to be concerns of it, like how it's wearing, and if it's the colors of it with the HDC.
Yeah,
So
no, yeah, I know that. I mean, it's just going to wear more quickly because it's paint, but be lucky if it lasts a season. But it allows you to test the concept and see how drivers react to it.
It's something that we could certainly explore. It's something we could talk to engineering about and talk to the HDC and all the other powers that be.
Mark?
Yeah, I think it's great that and Aaron and engineering are, that the crosswalk's been repainted, because it's foreshortened. When somebody's driving at 25 miles an hour, even, it's foreshortened, and you don't really see it till you get close. And the fog lines sound great, and Laura's already made the justification for that in terms of data. When this picture that's up right now, kind of tying into a little bit of what Nick was saying, and what about widening the crosswalk. I'm not sure why that crosswalk is diagonal, and I can sort of imagine from the way this looks that a car coming from the side street and wanting to make a left turn is kind of having to turn their head a lot to see a pedestrian in that little area before the red starts coming from the parking lot. Whereas if that crosswalk was wider and came straight off the wide section of sidewalk extension on the library side and just straight over to the corner, somebody trying to cross from the parking lot would be almost right at the corner. I mean, it would effectively be a bump out. So there's some things to consider there. While I'm talking, I'm just going to mention one other quick question, which is the 25-mile-an-hour effective speed limit there just by virtue of the fact of the signs when you enter town that says if it's not otherwise posted, it's 25. Where
No,
are
it's
the
posted.
postings?
No, there's a sign, there's a sign. There's a sign.
But how far away? Where is it?
It's about 200 feet or 100 feet. It's just between Thoreau Street and the library.
Okay, and the other,
It's
yeah.
posted as you turn onto onto Sudbury Road from Main Street, and it's posted if you were to turn off of Thoreau Street onto
Okay.
Sudbury Road. So it's posted in both directions in that stretch between the train station and the library.
Okay, thanks. And yeah, I mean, I'll just throw out another thing, which is that again, about the signage, to me, it would be better if there's two signs coming each direction. And to me, if the first sign said slow or be prepared to stop, these are signs I've seen, etc. If it didn't have a picture of a person, it would actually be better, because there's a strong temptation, anyway I have, to look for a person at that point and you can't actually see them until you get to the other. You have to like slow down first and then watch the crosswalk. But obviously making the crosswalk more visible and lighted is really important.
Mark, I will mention that there are some requirements for signage, especially around crosswalks. And so I believe that we have to have it signed at a certain distance, and that's why you have those two signs so close together, because you have to have advanced warning. And then it's also best practice if you have a mid-block crosswalk to have a crosswalk sign right at the crosswalk. And I think that one of the big problems that we have just as sort of in society is that we have sign blindness, right? So you drive down the road so often, or it's same with the posters, right? Or you see a poster so often that you just walk right past it and you don't remember that there's that event that you want to go to next week, because you've seen it so often that a lot of times people it's just part of the landscape. It's something that they're used to. And I think that's kind of the issue that we have with signs as well, is they just become part of our everyday, what we see when we drive down the road.
Right, but I mean, I appreciate about the spacing. I just wonder if the first sign is somehow distracting because of the particular nature of that first sign and the particular nature of that space. And some other type of sign in the same location would be better.
Right, but I think it's regulation, so I think we have to have it.
But
Yeah.
we don't have it for every crosswalk in town. We don't have we don't have two signs for every crosswalk in town. So I'm confused.
So whenever we have a new crosswalk, it is best practice to sign them, especially mid-block crosswalks. So if you have something that is not at a stop, you are supposed to have something that tells you that there is a crosswalk there, because you are not automatically stopping. Most of the places that don't have signage, it is because they were grandfathered in before this was sort of a thing you were supposed to have, right? So they haven't all been updated, and because there is already a desire to have less signage in town where they can get away with it, or where it hasn't been updated, it hasn't been added in yet.
Interesting.
We are at 9 o'clock, and we're not going to get through the whole slide presentation and get to the discussion tonight, unfortunately. So I do want to just come to some way to wrap up this conversation. Mark, I would just say that I think that gets into the engineering question a little bit. We have traffic, we have a town engineer whose job it is to understand the uniform design guidelines for signage. And I think that, we might identify the signs should be reviewed to see if there are modifications that can be made, but I think that us recommending specific signs being in specific places is beyond the scope of our charge as a committee, which is more about policy recommendations, about cyclists. And I had a whole thing I was going to get to about getting to that, but I did not, we started this conversation a little late, so we didn't get to it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to include this, this meeting, this slide presentation as a follow-up material, and then we can continue this conversation next week. I just want to make sure that that's okay with everybody to leave the conversation here and continue this, not next week, next month. Or if we want to stay on for longer, I just want to be respectful of people's times. It is 9 o'clock. Phil?
So I just wanted to make two comments. One is, I think this is an awesome discussion, and this was a really great pilot of getting the community involved. So 3 cheers to you guys for doing this. I think it was great. I wanted to also just throw in that my hope is that we can recommend to the DPW and their supervision of their contractors when they're doing the fog lines, that they actually do pay attention to the creating the sort of minimum distance that between the center line and the fog line, so that we can use that as an experiment. I know that there have been several places in town, like Barrett's Mill Road, where that wasn't done, and I thought it was a lost opportunity. And I think that it was because the company wasn't specifically instructed, you are to do this. So, my hope is we can make a recommendation that it be very clear when the work gets done that this is the expectation, and if they don't do it right, they're going to have to do it over again, because it's the way things go sometimes, unless you make it crystal clear.
And Aaron, just to clarify, we will have an opportunity to talk again as a committee before the fog lines design goes forward, or they're not going to do it between now and May 16th?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that's going to be, it takes a little bit of time to get the engineering drawings drawn up and to have it go through review and things like that. So I think it'll be later in the season. This is part of our paving contract for the painting contract for the season, which runs through all good weather. And we're playing catch up right now because we were not able to do most of our painting last year because of issues with supply chains.
All right, so any final words on this before we move to public comment? Nick?
Yeah, Phil, could you just explain again what the spec is you want on the fog lines? I didn't quite follow it.
So I think the result is supposed to be, or could be, the minimum traveled lane, which Laura described as between 10 and 11 feet from the center line. So wherever the fog line is from the curbstone, you're looking to make sure that 10 or 11 feet is where the fog line ends up, as opposed to putting the fog line and measuring it from the curbstone.
Gotcha.
It's just
Okay.
a different concept.
Yeah,
And, in thinking about the way that Barrett's Mill Road was striped a couple of years ago, it was clear that they were following the curbstone and not the center line. And, it was just a lost opportunity, because I think this will be actually somewhat easier because it's flat, it's straight, etc.
Yeah, and I will also be speaking with Steve about it and making sure I have an eye on the project.
Great. All right, so with that, I have promises to send you this slide presentation. You will discover that there are many things that we could do here, and we should talk all about who we want to prioritize in terms of our the potential policies that we might recommend here. And Aaron and I will work on getting speed data, maybe some preliminary speed data by our next meeting, so we have more data on that. Nick, if you feel like doing any research, I'd love if you're able to come up with more information about what you're proposing in terms of an improved sidewalk there.
I'll think about it. Yeah, by the way, I made this big point about the speed data. I don't necessarily know that we need the speed data if we just say there's a perception and that, we have a solution that will test the effectiveness. Okay.
That's good to know. Yes, because, okay, so just moving to public comment then, because I do want to wrap us up here. Andrew, Jim, you've been very patient, so.
Yeah, all right, but I'm like one of T.S. Eliot's cats. I have 4 different names. that's what the name you see on the screen is the name I last used. I answered anything, and thanks for being sensitive to that. It's been a very thoughtful discussion. Range wide seem to diverge and come back to center. I know our original charge, the original charge of this committee was to evaluate consumer complaints that the people, not of all whom have ideal mobility, feel unsafe crossing Sudbury Road. If we think about who uses the library, well, it's everybody. And that everybody includes school children, and everybody includes elderly people. If our focus is on that, we can talk about making that crosswalk visible. Fog lines are going to be an excellent test for a lot of the use of this road. And I'm glad to see that there's so much agreement for that, because the way we get around is changing. We have to support that. Anyway, it's been lovely to be included in this conversation, and a very thoughtful, agreeable group. Thanks.
Thanks so much, James. I would entertain a motion to go to bed.
I move to adjourn.
Great.
Second.
All right, here a second. Mark,
Aye.
Phil,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. Thank you guys so much. Sorry we didn't get through the discussion tonight.